What made you rage? Quit high school. During lunchtime, I was watching everyone eat their sad-looking pizza squares when I decided to order McDonald's on DoorDash. My stomach was growling and I hadn't eaten breakfast because my dad works nights and my mom leaves for her job at 5 a.m. The school wanted me to pay $6.50 for a grilled cheese that looked like cardboard, and I wasn't about to do that when I could get 2 McChickens for the same price. The thing that killed me was that I made too much money for free lunch by literally $17 a month. My parents worked their butts off at multiple jobs, and because of that $17, I had to pay full price for garbage food. Meanwhile, I watched teachers order DoorDash every single day. Mrs. Boone got Chipotle delivered to the front office twice a week. Coach Parrish had pizza delivered every Friday. Even the security guards ordered Chinese food and ate it at their desk by the metal detectors. I figured if they could do it, then so could I. I placed my order for 2 McChickens and a large fry and waited for the notification. The app said 20 minutes, so I asked for a bathroom pass and headed toward the front entrance. I could already taste those perfectly seasoned fries and that crispy chicken with extra mayo just how I liked it. The DoorDash driver texted me that he was outside. I walked through the main entrance where Officer Leon was scrolling on his phone, not even looking up. The driver was this nice older guy named Roberto who smiled when he saw me. I had tipped him $4 because I knew how hard those delivery jobs were from watching my cousin do it last summer. Roberto handed me the bag and said, "Enjoy your lunch, man," before heading back to his car. I was walking back through the entrance feeling pretty good about my life choices when everything went sideways. Officer Leon suddenly jumped up from his chair like someone lit him on fire. Before I could even process what was happening, he grabbed my arm and yelled, "Drop the bag." I was so confused I just stood there holding my McDonald's like an idiot. Then Officer Davis came running from nowhere and tackled me to the ground. My face hit the dirty school tile and I felt my lips split open. The McDonald's bag went flying and I heard my McChickens hit the floor with a sad splat. French fries scattered everywhere like little yellow pickup sticks. Officer Leon was kneeling on my back while Officer Davis grabbed my arms and pulled them behind me. Kids were starting to gather in the hallway recording everything on their phones. They dragged me to my feet and started marching me to the main office like I had just tried to assassinate the king in Old England. My lip was bleeding and I kept trying to explain it was just McDonald's, but they weren't listening. Officer Leon kept saying I allowed an unauthorized adult onto school premises and created a security breach. They shoved me into the little conference room beside the principal's office and told me to sit down and shut up. I sat in that room for 4 hours. 4 actual hours, staring at motivational posters about reaching for the stars while my stomach growled and my lip throbbed. Nobody brought me water or let me use the bathroom. They confiscated my phone so I couldn't even text my parents or doom scroll to pass the time. I could hear them outside talking about protocols and lockdown procedures, like I'd brought a terrorist into the building instead of a DoorDash driver. Finally, Principal Powell walked in with Officer Leon and some cop I'd never seen before. They sat across from me with these serious faces like we were in some FBI interrogation about crime rings. Principal Powell started talking about how I'd put the entire school at risk. He said I'd violated multiple security policies by directing an unknown adult to approach the building. The cop chimed in about how anyone could pretend to be a delivery driver, and I should have known better. I tried to explain about the teachers ordering food all the time, but Principal Powell cut me off. He said staff members had different protocols and clearances than students. He said what I did showed poor judgment and disregard for safety. Then he started talking about suspension and how this would go on my permanent record. The cop added that I was lucky they weren't pressing charges for creating a public disturbance. That's when something inside me just snapped. These people had tackled me over a McDonald's order. They'd made me bleed and treated me like a criminal and wasted my entire day. They'd thrown away the food I'd paid for with money I earned at my weekend job. And now they were trying to make me feel bad about it while teachers probably had sushi delivered to their classrooms. I stood up and looked Principal Powell dead in the eye. Then I raised both middle fingers high in the air. "This is what I think of your protocols." The cop started to stand up, but I was already walking toward the door. The cop's hand shot out and grabbed my arm before I could turn the doorknob. He yanked me back so hard I stumbled and almost fell into the table. Principal Powell jumped up from his chair yelling about assault charges and threatening behavior toward school officials. Officer Leon moved fast to block the exit while the cop twisted my arm behind my back. They shoved me down into the chair and the cop leaned over me talking about disorderly conduct charges. He said my middle finger gesture counted as a threatening motion toward authority figures. My hands were shaking, but I kept them flat on the table and stared straight ahead. Principal Powell grabbed the desk phone and started dialing while saying something about my mother needing to know immediately. He put it on speaker and I heard the restaurant noise in the background when she answered. Her voice went from confused to panicked when Powell said I was detained by police for threatening behavior. She kept asking what happened and saying she was leaving right away, but it was 40 minutes from her job. The cop stayed in the room watching me while Powell and Officer Leon went outside to fill out paperwork. Every few minutes, the cop would ask if I understood how serious this was. He kept saying I could be charged as an adult and this could follow me forever. I stayed quiet except to ask for water after my mouth got too dry to swallow. They brought me a tiny paper cup that I drank in one gulp and then refused to give me more. The clock on the wall moved so slow I thought it was broken. Finally, I heard my mom's voice in the hallway asking where I was. She rushed into the room still wearing her Applebee's uniform with her name tag hanging crooked. Her eyes went straight to my face and she touched my swollen lip real gentle. Then she turned to look at the officers and Principal Powell with this look I'd never seen before. Powell started talking about the security breach and my threatening gestures, but Mom cut him off. She wanted to know why I had a split lip and why nobody called her when I got hurt. The cop said I resisted security protocols and created my own injuries through non-compliance. Mom's voice got real quiet, which meant she was beyond mad. The meeting turned into this back and forth about criminal records and alternative schools. Powell kept saying my future was at risk because of my choices today. Mom kept asking why teachers could order food, but I got tackled for doing the same thing. They kept dodging her question and going back to my middle fingers like that was worse than slamming my face into the floor. The cop pulled out forms about juvenile citations while Powell talked about zero-tolerance policies. Mom had to sign papers saying she understood I was suspended pending a disciplinary hearing next week. She signed everything without reading it because she just wanted to get me out of there. The walk to her car felt like everyone in the world was watching us. Other parents picking up their kids stared at us like we were criminals. Mom didn't say anything until we got in her beat-up Honda. She drove home without the radio on, which was never a good sign. At the house, she went straight to the freezer and got a bag of frozen peas for my lip. She wrapped it in a dish towel and handed it to me without making eye contact. Dad was still sleeping in their room because his shift at the warehouse started at 11. We both knew not to wake him up yet because he needed his rest. Mom sat at the kitchen table going through the suspension paperwork while I held the peas on my face. My phone had been in my pocket the whole time, and when I turned it on, it started going crazy. Text after text from kids who saw me get dragged back into the office after the middle finger thing. Some were calling me stupid, and others were saying it was epic. Jade Waller sent me a video someone took of the original tackle in the hallway. The video showed Officer Leon grabbing me, and then Davis slamming me down over the McDonald's bag. You could see the food flying everywhere and hear kids gasping in the background. The video was only 20 seconds, but it showed everything clear as day. I watched it 3 times before showing it to Mom. She took my phone and watched it with her hand over her mouth. That's when we heard Dad's alarm going off in the bedroom. Mom looked at me, and we both knew this was going to get worse before it got better. Dad came out rubbing his eyes and saw Mom at the table with papers everywhere. He looked confused at first, and then saw my face with the bag of peas. Mom started explaining what happened, and his face went from sleepy to mad real fast. He grabbed the papers and started reading while Mom told him about the tackle and the 4 hours alone. When she got to the part about the middle fingers, his face turned red. But not at me. At them for what they did over some McDonald's. Mom pulled out the thick student handbook from the drawer where we kept all the school papers and started flipping through pages while Dad paced around the kitchen. He kept talking about how teachers got their food delivered every single day and nobody tackled them for it. The handbook had this whole section about campus security, but the wording was so confusing it could mean anything. It just said, outside food vendors, needed administrative approval, but didn't explain what that actually meant. Dad grabbed the book and read it 3 times trying to find something that said students couldn't order food. There was nothing specific about DoorDash or delivery apps or anything from this decade. I sat at the table and started writing down every single teacher I'd seen get food delivered since school started. Mrs. Boone got Chipotle on Tuesdays and Thursdays like clockwork for the past 3 months. Coach Parrish had Domino's every Friday during 5th period when he had planning time. The art teacher got Thai food at least once a week from that place downtown. Even the librarian ordered sandwiches from Jimmy John's and ate them at her desk. My list grew to 15 teachers with specific dates and restaurants I could remember. Mom took pictures of the handbook pages and my list with her phone for evidence. We stayed up until midnight going through everything and making notes about the double standard. Dad had to leave for his warehouse shift, but he hugged me tight before he went. Mom made me take ibuprofen for my lip and sent me to bed even though I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the tackle and how those fries scattered across the floor like I'd committed some huge crime. The next morning my phone buzzed with an automated email from the school district at exactly 7 a.m. It said I had 3 days of out-of-school suspension pending a formal disciplinary hearing next week. The email had all this legal language about my rights and responsibilities during the suspension period. I had to work at the grocery store this weekend, and missing those shifts would cost me almost $200. My manager was already annoyed that I couldn't work extra hours during the week because of school. This suspension was going to mess up everything, and maybe even cost me my job completely. Mom read the email over my shoulder and her jaw got tight the way it does when she's really mad. She called her boss to explain she might need time off for the hearing next week. I could hear her supervisor through the phone saying something about attendance points and final warnings. While Mom was on the phone, my screen lit up with a text from Jade asking if I was okay. She'd heard about the middle finger thing from kids who were in the hallway outside the office. Then she sent me the video again and asked if she could post it to show people what really happened. My first thought was that posting it would make everything worse and get me in more trouble. But then I thought about those officers slamming me down and Principal Powell acting like I was a terrorist. The anger burned so hot in my chest that I typed back telling her to do whatever she wanted. She said she'd blur out faces except mine and the officers, so nobody else would get in trouble. 5 minutes later, Stuart Riley's name popped up in my school email with the subject line, checking in. He was the only guidance counselor who actually cared about students instead of just pushing college brochures at everyone. His email said he'd heard about the incident and wanted to talk if I was comfortable with that. Since I couldn't come to campus during suspension, he offered to set up a Zoom call whenever worked for me. Mom saw the email and told me I should definitely talk to him because we needed allies. I replied saying I could talk that afternoon, and he sent back a meeting link immediately. At 2 o'clock, I logged into Zoom from our kitchen table with Mom sitting beside me taking notes. Stuart's face appeared on screen, and he looked genuinely worried, which surprised me. He asked me to tell him exactly what happened from the beginning without leaving anything out. I went through the whole thing from ordering the food to the tackle to the 4 hours alone. He typed notes the entire time and asked specific questions about the force they used. When I got to the part about my split lip, he asked if I'd gotten medical attention. I told him nobody even offered me a Band-Aid, or asked if I was hurt. He shook his head and said that violated several district policies about student welfare and medical care. Then he asked if I wanted to file a formal incident report about the excessive force. He explained that it would create an official record that the district would have to investigate. Mom nodded at me to say yes, so Stuart walked me through the whole process step by step. We spent an hour going through every detail, and he helped me write it in official language. The report talked about excessive force, selective enforcement of policies, and the 4-hour detention without water or bathroom access. Stuart said to stick to facts and specific times without getting emotional or making accusations we couldn't prove. He promised to submit it directly to the district office and advocate for me during the hearing. After we logged off, Jade texted me that she'd posted a clipped version of the tackle video. She'd added text explaining that I'd just ordered McDonald's and got tackled for it by security. Within an hour, she sent screenshots showing it had been shared in 12 different group chats. Kids were commenting things like insane, and cops are crazy, and free him with fire emojis. Some people said I was dumb for ordering food, but most were shocked by the violence. Then Jade sent another screenshot that made my stomach drop. Some teacher had DM'd her saying she needed to delete the video immediately to protect the school's reputation. The message said posting it was irresponsible and could have serious consequences for her academic standing. Jade had written back, "Is that a threat?" And the teacher hadn't responded yet, but we both knew what this meant. They were trying to cover it up and intimidate us into staying quiet about what happened. Mom saw the screenshots and immediately called the school's main office demanding to speak to someone about the incident. The secretary transferred her around 3 times before someone finally said she needed to file a formal records request. Mom asked for all security footage, any body cam recordings from the officers, and their written incident reports. The person on the phone said that kind of request could take several weeks to process. Mom's voice got sharp as she explained that her child had been assaulted and she wanted those records immediately. They just kept repeating that there was a process, and she'd need to submit the request in writing. Mom hung up and started typing an email with every single thing she wanted from them. Meanwhile, Stuart sent me a draft of the incident report to review before he submitted it officially. It was 3 pages of detailed facts about times, locations, and specific actions taken by each person. He'd included the part about teachers ordering food regularly and how I'd been singled out as a student. The language was professional, but you could tell he was mad about what happened to me. We made a few small changes, and then he submitted it to the district equity office. He said someone named Graciela Shaw would probably be contacting me soon about the investigation. The rest of that day felt weird being home when I should have been in the school. I kept checking my phone expecting more threats or bad news, but instead kids kept messaging support. Coming all kinds of messages from kids I barely knew saying they couldn't believe what happened, and that the security guards were out of control. The next morning, Mom's phone buzzed with an email from the school district that went out to every single family talking about reviewing safety protocols and making sure everyone understood the importance of secure campuses. They never mentioned my name or what actually happened, but just used all this vague corporate language about continuous improvement and community safety that made me feel like I didn't even exist. Stuart called me that afternoon and said he'd set up a meeting with the school nurse who could document my injuries officially since nobody had checked on me during those 4 hours in that room. I met her on a video call, and she took screenshots of my busted lip while asking me specific questions about whether anyone offered me medical attention, or water, or bathroom breaks during the detention. She typed everything into an official form and said this would become part of the formal record, which Stuart said was crucial for our case. That same day, Jade texted me a photo of a note someone had slipped into her locker that said she needed to stop stirring up trouble if she knew what was good for her. We couldn't prove who wrote it, but the handwriting looked rushed and angry, and Jade was getting scared about what might happen next. Mom spent that evening going through all our pay stubs and tax documents to show exactly how we made $17 too much per month to qualify for free lunch. She spread everything out on the kitchen table and highlighted the numbers showing how Dad's overtime and her second job pushed us just over the limit by such a tiny amount that it was basically cruel. She scanned everything and sent it to Stuart, who said it perfectly showed the unfairness of the system where working harder actually punished families like ours. 2 days later, Graciela called to say she was formally requesting all the security footage that Mom had asked for, but now she had district authority to demand it immediately instead of waiting weeks. The school administration suddenly got real cooperative when someone with actual power started asking for the same materials they'd been dragging their feet on giving to my mom. Graciela said she'd review everything personally and that she had serious concerns about selective enforcement of policies based on what she'd already heard. Then things got crazy when Jade's video somehow made it to a local news reporter who started calling our house asking if we wanted to do an interview about the incident. Mom talked to me about it, and we both agreed to stay quiet until after the hearing because we didn't want to give the school any reason to say we were trying to influence things through the media. But knowing the news was interested made me feel like maybe people outside the school would finally see how messed up this whole thing was. The next week at the school turned wild when dozens of students decided to organize their own protest by all ordering DoorDash at the exact same time during lunch. The delivery drivers started showing up one after another, and the administration completely lost it, threatening everyone with suspension if they didn't cancel their orders immediately. Kids were recording everything, and even though most people canceled their orders, the point was made that the rules were stupid and unfair. The principal sent out another vague email about unauthorized demonstrations and how food delivery was a safety issue, but everyone could see they were just mad about losing control. The night before my hearing, Mom and I sat at the kitchen table going over my statement again and again, making sure I stuck to exact times and specific facts without getting emotional or making accusations we couldn't prove. We practiced me saying things like, Officer Leon grabbed my arm at 12:47 p.m., and Officer Davis tackled me at 12:48 p.m., instead of just saying they attacked me for no reason. Mom kept reminding me to stay calm and let the facts speak for themselves, even though we both wanted to scream about how unfair everything was. Stuart called that evening with a warning that the SRO union was sending a representative to defend the officers at the hearing, and that this person would probably try to make it seem like the officers were just following protocol to keep everyone safe. He said the deck felt stacked against us, but promised he would advocate hard for me and make sure my side of the story got heard properly. He told me not to let the union rep intimidate me, and to just keep telling the truth about what happened. Then right before bed, Graciela sent an email saying she would attend the hearing as an observer because she had concerns about several policy applications based on her review of the materials. She couldn't officially take sides, but her presence might be the only thing that stopped them from completely railroading me, since they'd have to be more careful with someone from the district watching everything. Mom printed out the email and added it to our folder of evidence, feeling like maybe we had a fighting chance after all. The morning of the hearing arrived way too fast, and Mom woke me up at 6, even though we didn't need to be there until 9. She made eggs and toast, but neither of us could eat much because our stomachs were doing flips. Dad had taken the morning off from his night job, which meant losing money we couldn't afford to lose. But he said some things were more important than a paycheck. We all got dressed in our nicest clothes, which for me meant the button-up shirt from my cousin's wedding last year, and the only pants I owned without holes. The drive to the district office took forever with nobody talking, and the radio playing some morning talk show about traffic that we weren't really listening to. The building looked like every other boring government building with gray walls and tiny windows that probably hadn't been cleaned since the 90s. We walked through the main entrance where a security guard checked our IDs and gave us visitor badges, before pointing us toward conference room B. The hallway smelled like old coffee and copy machine toner, and our footsteps echoed on the shiny floor that somebody had waxed too much. When we opened the door to conference room B, my stomach dropped because the room was already packed with people sitting around this huge wooden table. Principal Powell sat at one end with his laptop open, and a stack of folders in front of him looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Officer Leon and Officer Davis were there in their full uniforms sitting next to some guy in a suit who had to be their union rep based on how he kept whispering to them and sliding papers across the table. 3 people from the district sat on the other side, including Graciela, who gave me the tiniest nod when we walked in. Stuart was already there with his own folder of papers, and he'd saved seats for us right next to him. Mom squeezed my hand as we sat down, and I could feel her shaking a little bit, which made me want to protect her, even though she was the one protecting me. The union rep started things off by saying this was all a misunderstanding, and that the officers followed standard protocol for dealing with an unauthorized visitor on the school grounds. Principal Powell pulled up some policy manual on his laptop and started reading sections about campus security and visitor procedures in this boring, monotone voice. Then it was my turn to talk, and Stuart helped me lay out all our evidence on the table, including printed screenshots of teacher DoorDash orders and the timeline I'd written showing exactly what happened minute by minute. I explained how Mrs. Boone got Chipotle delivered twice a week and nobody tackled the delivery driver or called it a security breach. The nurse's report showed photos of my split lip and confirmed that nobody gave me medical attention or even water during those 4 hours in the conference room. Stuart presented documentation showing that I'd asked for a bathroom break 3 times and been denied each time, which he said violated basic human dignity standards. Officer Leon tried to interrupt, saying I was being dramatic, but the district administrator told him to wait his turn. I kept going through my timeline showing how the officers never asked me any questions before tackling me, and how they used way more force than necessary for a teenager holding a bag of food. The union rep kept shuffling through his papers and making these annoyed sounds every time I made a good point. Officer Davis claimed they had to act fast because I could have been bringing anything into the school, but then couldn't explain why the same logic didn't apply to the daily teacher deliveries. Graciela finally spoke up, asking if the officers could explain the selective enforcement of these supposed security protocols. She wanted to know why a student ordering food triggered an immediate violent response while staff doing the exact same thing faced 0 consequences. Principal Powell started stammering about different expectations for students and staff, but Graciela pressed him on where exactly these different policies were written down. He couldn't point to any specific document that said teachers could order delivery, but students couldn't. Then Mom pulled out our family's pay stubs and tax returns, showing we made $17 too much per month to qualify for free lunch. She laid them out on the table one by one, explaining how we couldn't afford the overpriced school food, but also couldn't get help because of that tiny amount. She asked why her kid got tackled and hurt for trying to eat lunch the same way teachers did every single day. The room went completely quiet, and even the union rep stopped shuffling his papers. One of the district administrators started taking notes really fast while looking between the financial documents and the injury report. After 2 hours of back and forth, they told us to wait in the hallway while they discussed everything. Mom and I sat on these uncomfortable plastic chairs holding hands and not saying much because what was there to say? Stuart came out a few times to check on us and brought us water from the break room. We could hear muffled voices through the door, sometimes getting louder, like people were arguing, but we couldn't make out the words. Other people walked by giving us curious looks, probably wondering what we did to end up sitting outside a conference room looking stressed. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably 45 minutes, they called us back in. Principal Powell announced that my suspension would be reduced to time served, and while a note would remain in my file, it wouldn't affect my graduation or college applications. The officers would receive additional training on proportional response and de-escalation techniques, but that was it for consequences. The district promised to clarify food delivery policies to ensure consistent application for both staff and students going forward. It wasn't real justice because the officers who hurt me and denied me water for 4 hours basically got away with it, but at least they admitted the current system was broken and unfair, which felt like something. Graciela pulled me aside afterward and said she'd be monitoring the policy changes personally to make sure they actually happened. The next day, Stuart texted me that he'd advocated for Jade and got her punishment reduced from suspension to just a warning. She had to write some stupid essay about responsible social media use, which she filled with subtle digs at the administration that went right over their heads. Going back to the school the next week felt completely weird with everyone staring at me in the hallways. Some kids came up to thank me for standing up to the stupid rules, while others whispered that I was just trying to cause trouble for attention. A few teachers smiled at me in the hallways, and one even whispered "good job" when nobody was looking, but others treated me like I had a disease they might catch. Mrs. Boone stopped ordering Chipotle for exactly 2 weeks before starting again like nothing had happened. The security guards watched me extra close whenever I walked past them, like they were waiting for me to cause more problems. But something had shifted because kids started talking more openly about the unfair rules and double standards they saw every day. The next day during lunch, the cafeteria manager walked up to my table where I was eating crackers from home. She sat down next to me and started pointing at the menu board behind the register. She showed me how if I ordered just the burger patty without the bun, it was only $2. The chicken strips alone cost $3.50 instead of $7 with the meal. She wrote down all these secret combinations on a napkin and slid it over to me. Her hands were shaking a little bit, and she kept looking around to make sure nobody was watching us talk. She patted my shoulder before walking back to the kitchen, and I felt less alone than I had in days. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from Graciela while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. She had attached a 12-page document about new food delivery rules she was writing for the whole district. The draft had stuff about pickup zones and verification codes and equal access for everyone who wanted to order food. She asked me to read through it and tell her what would actually work for students like me. I spent 3 hours going through every page and making notes in the margins about what would help and what would just make things worse. I suggested using text codes that delivery drivers could show to security, so nobody had to leave the building. I wrote about how students and teachers should follow the exact same rules with no special treatment for anybody. I added ideas about sign-out sheets and time limits and designated pickup windows that would keep everyone safe but still let us eat real food. Sending my thoughts back to Graciela felt good because somebody was finally listening to what we actually needed instead of just making rules to control us. She emailed back the next morning saying my suggestions were exactly what she needed to make the policy fair. 2 weeks passed with nothing happening, and I figured it was all just talk to make me shut up about the whole thing. Then Stuart pulled me into his office and showed me a draft announcement on his computer screen about new delivery protocols starting next month. The school was setting up a pickup area by the side entrance with cameras and a check-in system for all food deliveries. Students could order food if they signed out properly, and teachers had to follow the same exact procedures with no exceptions. 3 weeks after that meeting, the announcement went out to everyone through the automated calling system and email blast. The principal sounded annoyed reading the new rules over the morning announcements, but he had to do it anyway. Kids started talking about ordering lunch, and which restaurants delivered fastest, and how to split delivery fees to save money. The first day the new system went live, Jade texted me to meet her at the pickup zone during lunch. We both ordered McDonald's using the new sign-out system and waited by the designated area with our verification codes ready. The delivery driver showed up right on time, and the security guard checked his ID against the order confirmation on his phone. Jade grabbed our bags and we sat on the benches they had put in the pickup area to eat our McChickens. Other kids started showing up with their own orders, and pretty soon 20 of us were eating together outside. Someone had ordered pizza and cut it into squares to share with people who couldn't afford their own food. Another kid passed around mozzarella sticks from the Italian place down the street. We were all laughing and eating real food for once without worrying about getting tackled or suspended. That weekend, Dad came home from his shift with a huge smile on his face. He had gotten a $2 raise at the warehouse, which meant an extra $320 every month. Mom did the math on her calculator and started crying happy tears when she realized we finally qualified for free lunch. The next Monday, I walked into the cafeteria and handed them my new lunch number without having to pay anything. The irony hit me hard that we needed to make less money to actually afford food, but at least now I could eat. Stuart found me after school a few days later and asked me to walk with him to the parking lot. But he told me the teachers had complained for weeks about losing their special delivery privileges. Some of them tried to get around the new rules by having food delivered to their cars instead. But after a month even, they admitted the new system worked better because deliveries were organized and nobody had to leave class to get their food. He said what I did by refusing to accept unfair treatment had changed things for everyone, even if it didn't feel that way. 6 months passed, and I became the kid people came to when security messed with them, or teachers played favorites. A freshman got detention for wearing a hood inside, while her teacher wore a baseball cap every day. I helped her file a complaint using the same form Stuart had shown me. A kid in my math class got written up for having his phone out while the teacher scrolled Instagram at her desk. We documented everything with photos and timestamps and sent it to Graciela, who was still monitoring the district policies. My split lip had healed into a tiny scar that I could feel with my tongue when I was nervous. But the anger that made me flip off the principal had turned into something more useful. Every time I helped another student stand up to unfair rules, I remembered sitting in that conference room for 4 hours. I remembered my McChickens splattered on the floor and Officer Leon's knee in my back. Now I use those memories to push forward instead of giving up when things get hard. Well, that was definitely a journey to share with you all. Kinda makes you look at things a little differently, right? Thanks for sticking around with me. Like the video, it helps more than you think.